Good morning and good afternoon, distinguished guests, fellow artists, friends, and for members of the online salon, On Salon, fellow campers. Hello and welcome to Chapter 1 of Maintaining Creativity 7, featuring a keynote address by former Governor General, the Right Honorable Michaëlle Jean. My name is Scott Walker. I'm the Executive Director of CSARN, and I'm very pleased to welcome you here today. As you can probably gather from the title, this is the 7th edition of our annual conference and the third presented online. As some of you know, we presented our first 4 chapters or first 4 editions live and in person in Toronto. But then in 2020, something happened that prevented us from meeting in person. I can't remember what it was, really. COVID provided us with an unexpected opportunity, a chance to reach beyond Toronto's borders and embrace more artists from right across Canada. Last year, we were in the 73rd wave, and we continued to present Maintaining Creativity online. And this year, it's almost as if everything is back to normal. I mean, I went to a business reception last week, the first one for me in about 3 years. I had to find my suit. I had to remember how to tie a tie. I walked into a room full of unmasked strangers without holding an ArriveCan app to tell me what their status was. Normal can be scary. But one thing that will be part of the new normal, I promise, is that we will continue to present Maintaining Creativity online so that we can embrace elder artists, not only in Toronto, but also in Vancouver and Montreal, in Ottawa, Winnipeg, Halifax, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, but also from Westville, Nova Scotia, from Bon Chai, PEI, Magog, Quebec, Manitoulin Island, Ontario, Okotoks, Alberta, and the Gulf Islands of British Columbia, and everywhere in between where artists live and create. And we'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that we live and create on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land, now called Canada, since time immemorial. We would like to say this as part of our covenant with all Indigenous nations to share, respect, and protect the land in the spirit of peace and friendship, and to honor the future generations of all our nations. We have quite a few people joining us for the first time today, and if you are one of them, thank you for checking us out. Welcome. I'd like to encourage you to join the community of CSARN artists by going to our website, scrolling down to the join button, filling out the form, which basically tells us what kind of art you practice and what part of the country you live in, so that if we're doing something specific to your discipline or your area, we can know to include you. It's absolutely free. It's csarn.ca is our website, csarn.ca. That will enable you to take advantage of our programs such as our paid mentoring program, our online salon networking sessions, the On Salons, our webinars. We've got a couple of webinars coming up next month on social media and one on artistic legacy planning. We have a Healthcare Assist and Connect program through our friends at Bayshore, and of course our annual conference. Here's how Chapter 1 is going to unfold today. We will hear from our keynote speaker. She and I will have a short chat. You're invited to pose some questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Then we will take a 10-minute break and then begin the breakouts, which are kind of like the On Salons. It's a chance, if you haven't participated in one, to test out an On Salon, chance to chat with other artists from across Canada, maybe even reconnect with an old acquaintance. We've had people in the On Salons going, I haven't seen you for 30 years, which is great to witness. Each breakout will have a moderator who guides the discussions. They'll last about 40 minutes, and then we'll all gather back here to find out what the other groups were talking about and wish you well until, hopefully, next week at this time. Right now, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce the chair of CSARN. She's a lawyer, former Senator of Canada, a former radio producer and vice president of CBC Radio Canada. She was the founding CEO of the Quasi-Judicial Tribunal for the Self-Employed in Canada's cultural industry, and that's just for starters. Her story would make one heck of a book. Please welcome the Honorable Marie Poulin.
Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes. Can you see me?
Yes, we can. It's all working brilliantly.
Yes, we can. So, dear friends of CSARN, it's my honor today to introduce our Maintaining Creativity Conference keynote speaker, the Right Honorable Michaëlle Jean. As we know, Madame Jean was born in Port-au-Prince en Haïti, but her family had to flee Duvalier's regime in 1967. They chose Canada, thank God. They lived in Thetford Mines, then moved to Montreal. And despite the many challenges the family faced, Madame Jean decided that education would be the key to her life. She studied and obtained degrees from the University of Montreal, the University of Florence, the University of Perugia, the University of Milan. Yes, besides French and English, Madame Jean is fluent in Spanish, in Italian, in Haitian Creole. Now, Madame Jean began working at the CBC Radio-Canada in 1988. And I have to tell you, just between us, I was a vice president at that time exactly. And I was following her career very closely because I recognized her strengths with the spoken word, with research, with interviews, with objectivity, with presentations. She was outstanding. I have to tell you, I was the chair of her fan club all the way. So when Prime Minister Paul Martin recommended her appointment as Canada's Governor General to Queen Elizabeth, I was thrilled. And as a senator, I attended her official announcement. And she served us so well from 2005 to 2010. Then she serves as Chancellor of the University of Ottawa from 2012 to 2015. And I have to tell you, the president of the university, Jacques Frémont, told me she was an outstanding chancellor. But then she went on to become Secretary General to l'Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie from 2015 to 2019. Over all the years that I've known her, I have to tell you that we have had in Madame Jean an advocate for the arts, an advocate for Canadian culture, an advocate for international diplomacy through culture. And so Madame Jean, Madame Michaëlle Jean, is continuing to work with her husband, the screenwriter and filmmaker, Monsieur Daniel Lafont. And together, they are not only a life partnership, but I have to say also a professional partnership after all these years. And so thank you, Madame Jean, for promoting culture and creativity through your foundation again today. Madame Jean, à vous la parole.
Oh, what an incredible introduction. Greetings, dear friends, chers amis, bonjour. Merci infiniment, chère Marie-Paule Charette-Poulain, honorable amie, pour la gentillesse et pour la chaleur de vos mots de présentation. Ça me va droit au cœur. And thank you, Scott. Thanks to all of you in attendance for including me in this, I believe, 7th edition of the Maintaining Creativity Annual Conference of the Canadian Senior Artists Resource Network, CSARN. The honor to be invited in your midst is all the greater that I do not consider myself an artist proper, but an admirer, a supporter, and a follower of everything creative and artistic. I want to pay homage to you, the hundreds of you who have given and continue to devote so much of yourself to the pursuit of creative expression, to what you bring to life, your quest for truth and beauty, your quest for new openings into our shared humanity, charting new emotions and thoughts, feelings and insights into the human experience. To be an artist is to be a relentless quest, to be on a relentless quest for authenticity. To be an artist is to strive for transcendence with the utmost sincerity. To be an artist is to rummage the intimately personal to find the deeply universal. To be an artist is to unearth meaning and convey emotion, to speak to yet unspoken conditions, to say what was never said or is difficult to say, to create words and vocabulary for the emergent reality. To be an artist is to seek new ways, work on small miracles that open little cracks to break down the walls between us. To be an artist is to be a truth seeker. Further, the power of the artist is to make that truth emotional. Art is the shortest way from one human being to another. Art is the shortest way from one human being to another, wrote André Malraux. It follows that maintaining creativity is all about nurturing an ageless, youthful sensitivity that feeds our capacity to reach the other. To maintain creativity is to never stop going forward, exerting and maintaining movement and equilibrium on the unicycle of artistic pursuits. Like the lifelong athlete, we train and maintain the creative muscle through constant practice into our older years. Briser les solitudes, breaking down solitudes, is the motto which I chose to emblazon my term as Governor General of Canada. I have always deemed it essential to create opportunities for different generations, communities, cultures, and backgrounds to communicate and work together for the well-being of everyone in this vast country of ours. In this, I have seen the power of the arts and its capacity to bring us past narrow self-interest beyond the limitations of every man for himself. I know what an incredible gift creativity has brought, what enormous contributions the arts have made to my own existence. I chose to share my life with writer, filmmaker, philosopher Jean-Daniel Lafont, knowing deep within myself that I wanted to share with him that space for freedom. You know, the freedom to think, freedom to hear and be heard, freedom to say, freedom to speak up and take action. Over 10 years ago, some were puzzled by the choice my husband and I made to create a foundation dedicated to the power of the arts, seized upon by marginalized young lives, to join and support their capacity to save and uplift, to create and transform lives and communities. During my mandate as 27th Governor General of Canada from 2005 to 2010, I made serving Canadian youth one of my priorities. And as I traveled across the country with Jean-Daniel, we engaged with young people from coast to coast to coast, many of them disenfranchised youth, listening to their stories, shedding light on their realities and concerns. And everywhere we went, I strove, to provide spaces where their voices could be heard. I encouraged them to engage with their communities, with movers and shakers and decision makers, to use the full power of their creativity. And the response was just phenomenal. With help from young people across Canada, we created an urban arts program, we created the Youth Dialogue series, the Citizen Voices web platform, and the Art Matters forums. These brought together thousands upon thousands of Canadians. And by 2010, when my mandate ended, we had developed such strong connections throughout Canada. We knew we wanted to found an institution focused on young people and the arts as tools for social change, inclusion, and justice for all in this country. Thus was born the Michaël Jean Foundation, the legacy project of my 5 years as the head of state of Canada. Young people confronted with harsh and difficult circumstances, are not being idle, they are struggling. They have shown us through their inspiring and creative initiatives the importance and the impact of the power of the arts. Like you, they use the arts to speak out, to address sensitive issues and realities. Through the arts, I have seen them become empowered as they regain self-esteem and confidence, breaking out of isolation. And some have told us how the arts kept them alive. Ever since, the Michael Jaure Foundation has carried out great collaborative projects with courageous, creative, and insightful young people, working as an ally to bring forward their civic and creative initiatives, their perspectives, and to take action against all forms of exclusion, including systemic racial discrimination, hate speech, hate crimes, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia. And you know, the courage, the passion, and the brilliance with which young people continue to lead their generation encourage us all to learn as much as we can from them. At the other end of the spectrum, artists who have grown out their younger years to become creative elders play a vital role. They are essential repositories and transmitters of cultural knowledge. They, I mean you, are living examples that it can be done. You provide the younger generations with the assurance that an artistic life is not only possible, but a source of accomplishment. Collectively, we must realize and value what the elder artist has to offer to society. Your contribution as mentors, of course, but primarily as living treasures of memory per se. When an elder dies, a library burns to the ground. Amadou Hampâté-Bâ, the famous writer and historian from Mali, Africa. All of you are living, breathing libraries of precious and irreplaceable cultural knowledge. Your art is a form of condensed memory. It memorializes existence. You hold that memory and give it new life. Such is the role of the elder artist in a rapidly changing world. How you have learned to manipulate light and shadow, color and form, sound and silence, description and inference, intensity and ease, rhythm and melody, movement and stillness. All of that is precious artful expertise, an expertise that needs to be protected, that needs to be supported and safeguarded through transmission. So you know how the skills you have honed over decades are worthy of not only of preservation, but of proper recognition, proper validation, proper compensation. Needless to say, sustenance and dignity are essential to the recognized status of the artist. As you probably know from an outdated study based on old data from 2016, the median individual income of Canada's artists was $24,300 at the time, or 44% less than all Canadian workers. The average for all Canadian workers is $43,500, while the typical artist earned employment income of $17,300, or 56% lower than the median of all workers, which is $39,000, figures well under the poverty line. Why should poverty be so manifestly tied to life as an artist? There's nothing romantic about poverty. 6 years later, how much has changed? We don't know. We need an update. But what we do know is that we have been through a major pandemic, which saw the share of culture and the arts as part of the gross domestic product, the GDP, fell by more than half, with 1 in 5 jobs in the sector simply gone, leaving over 40% of artists and cultural workers facing anxiety, worry, and depression, with a similar share pondering whether they should leave the profession. Needless to say, we must rethink our public policies in terms of culture and support for the arts. Efforts must be made to persuade our decision makers to better support long-term creators. Why? Because art is added value. Art is essential to individual and collective development. I wouldn't dare say that art is always utilitarian, though it can be that, but it is always essential. History has also shown that the arts can serve other masters. The arts can and have been used to serve domination, empire, tyranny. The arts can and have been used as a tool, as propaganda, as an instrument for power. See how totalitarian regimes have used art to impose a point of view, to promote an ideology counter to fundamental humanistic values, to annihilate the other. The Nazis did this quite well. The arts were used to promote the Aryan, Übermensch. A representation of what they said was the very quintessence of superiority translated into an aesthetic. Fascist iconography, symbols, music, displays served authoritarian regimes. The church did it too. Gargoyles were carved into the architecture of old churches, usually in the form of grotesque animals or hideous monsters, to create a symbolic representation of hell, to show damnation outside of the church, to be contrasted with salvation inside it. The Maya and Aztec temples were built with stone steps so steep to serve as a metaphor. Going up to the sky was ergonomic. Trying to go down was hell. So here's a question. What happens when the unique, the artistic and cultural expression of a whole population is despised, repressed, and forbidden? This happened in Canada. It was done to the original inhabitants of this land, Indigenous peoples, First Nations, the Métis and the Inuit. I can't help but think of this older woman who told me her story, a story I can't evoke without, feeling emotional. She said to me, I was taken away at age 3, torn away from my family to be taken to residential school. I was told that everything that defined me, my whole culture, was a manifestation of evil. Even my language was the devil's words because we were savages. Imagine being told that in early childhood. She said, from that point on, from age 3 and for the many years following, every night, she said, I would go to bed and talk to myself in my mother tongue. From day one, she said, I resisted. So much so that when I returned to my community many years later, my language was still very much alive because I had kept it alive on my own. Imagine a 3-year-old child taking that decision and keeping, that form of resistance to protect and safeguard everything that defined her. Language has that much power. Language is also a creative force. Attempts at cultural genocide, this awful experiment, we must admit, has been run again and again. It happened as well in other countries of the world through decades. centuries passed. Un peuple sans mémoire est un peuple sans avenir, disait Aimé Césaire, le poète éternel, l'homme de combat politique. A people without memory is a people without a future, said Aimé Césaire, poet, author, and politician from Martinique, reminding us that if memory is a treasure to be shared, it is also a weapon that can be manipulated, revised, denied. Those who wish to destroy the other go for what defines their soul. They steal the treasures that speak to who they are. We have seen jihadists do this with contempt and deep-seated hatred in their attempts to destroy unique cultural heritage. Colonial empires have done the same thing to conquer lands and peoples, pillaging, disseminating, and destroying their most precious, cultural assets. All of us come from unique circumstances with forces that shaped who we are. I was born in Haiti from those women, those men, those children cruelly torn away and dispossessed of everything they had, dispossessed of their lands, their homes, their communities, their languages, their cultures, their names, their dignity, their humanity. I was born of some of the 20 million to 30 million human beings who were captured and then deported to be sold as pack animals. I was born of plantations that, through total enslavement, the forced labor of thousands of my ancestors, ensured the prosperity of the European colonial powers, which seized the continent they called the Americas, whose indigenous populations they massacred, impoverished, and in some cases exterminated. On the plantations, every attempt was made to quash cultural expression, even communication itself through language. The masters attempted to suppress by making sure that people who shared a common language wouldn't be allowed to live and work together. Family ties were broken, ethnic roots severed on purpose. My ancestors therefore had to forge and cobble together a new language out of the master's words in French, under the French colony, superimposed on African grammar. Birth in Creole was creativity maintained through cultural resistance. I was born of Saint-Domingue, the former crown jewel of French colonies, where a revolutionary movement, unprecedented in scale and impact, was started in Bois Caïman in August of 1791 by a cultural and religious voodoo ceremony led by Duty Boukman, voodoo priest and leader of the Maroons, and Cécile Fatima, a famous mambo or voodoo priestess, daughter of an enslaved African woman and a white Frenchman from Corsica. Then came a powerful call from valiant Black combatants like Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Alexandre Pétion, Henri Christophe, followed boldly by 500,000 revolted slaves armed with an invincible courage. Memory is important to me. I received it from my elders, and I know that this is how Haiti was born out of this resistance that we must celebrate. The struggle of men and women determined to end an immoral trade, the shameful exploitations that condemned them to non-existence, and who found in the symbols and shining values of liberty, equality, fraternity, a breathtaking possibility to be born again. I was born of these men and women who found in the searing power of such ideas, remedy the pangs of their own thirst for freedom, an answer to their deep aspiration for equality, a response to their immense need for fraternity. So today, dear friends, we would not be in the presence of one another. And the woman that I am would not be here with you, a free woman, were it not for the astonishing success of that struggle rooted in cultural resistance. One thing that has never changed is the Haitian people's passion for expressing their lives and their emotions through the arts. As different nationalities arrived and made their mark on the island, Haiti's culture evolved and absorbed them. Food, dance, song, religion, art in Haiti is a blend of its history, including French, African, and native Taino influences. And I would say also Spanish influences. We captured everything. There's an important also Arabic, community in Haiti. There's also a Jewish community. We are, we have this capacity of absorbing and including. Slave resistance was cultural as well as political. The resistance of a people to being swallowed up by the exploitative, brutality of a foreign way of life. Cultural resistance is a refusal to abandon one's values and traditions, using meanings and symbols that is cultured to contest and combat the dominant power, constructing a different vision of the world in the process. The shackles of chains could not define us. We did not let servitude determine who we are. We did not succumb to cultural eradication. Enslaved people throughout the Americas, the West Indies, and the Caribbean resisted the system of bondage through the formation of distinctive cultures, which kept hope alive in the face of severe persecution. Cultural resistance was expressed in a multitude of ways, through language, dress, song and dance, music and rhythms, spirit and values. Take Negro or Black spirituals, for example. The Negro spirituals played a critical role in the creation of America's unique musical language. From a purely historical point of view, they represent the first recorded utterances from a people in bondage, with a slow evolutionary process over nearly 250 years. Spirituals, like many other musical genres across the African diaspora, draw on traditions from West Africa, but spirituals are specific to the experience of the enslaved in the United States and the rest of the Americas. While the same artistry and craft produced other, recognizable but decidedly different music across the Caribbean and South America. The spirituals led to blues and jazz and gospel, which led to rhythm and blues, which led to rock and roll, which led to hip hop, and so on, with influence still felt around the globe today. In his memoir, 1845 memoir, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, the former slave and famous abolitionist, orator and writer wrote, and I quote, enslaved people would make the dense old woods for miles around reverberate with their wild songs, revealing at once the highest joy and the deepest sadness. They would compose and sing as they went along, consulting neither time nor tune. The thought that came up, came out, if not in the word, in the sound, and as frequently in the one as in the other. They would sometimes sing the most pathetic sentiment in the most rapturous tone, and the most rapturous sentiment in the most pathetic tone. They told a tale of woe, which was then altogether beyond my feeble comprehension. There were tones loud, long, and deep. They breathed the prayer and complaint of souls boiling over with the bitterest anguish. Every tone was a testimony against slavery and a prayer to God for deliverance from chains. The hearing of those wild notes always depressed my spirit and filled me with ineffable, sadness. I frequently found myself in tears while hearing them. End of quote. The spirituals created by slaves for themselves were generally misunderstood by white observers. Again, Douglas explains, and I quote, "I've often been utterly astonished since I came to the North to find persons who could speak of the singing among slaves as evidence of their contentment and happiness. It is impossible to conceive of a greater mistake. Slaves sing most when they are most unhappy. The song of the slaves represents the sorrows of their heart, and they are relieved by them only as an aching heart is relieved by its tears. At least such is my experience," he said. "I have often sung to drown my sorrow, but seldom to express my happiness. Crying for joy, and singing for joy were alike uncommon to me while in the jaws of slavery." The singing of someone cast away upon a desolate island might be as appropriately considered as evidence of contentment and happiness as the singing of a slave. The songs of the one and of the other are prompted by the same emotion. End of quote. Still, Douglas acknowledged the power of the spiritual on white listeners as he went on to write, "I have sometimes thought that the mere hearing of those songs would be more to impress some minds with the horrible character of slavery than the reading of whole volumes of philosophy on the subject could do." So, undoubtedly, Negro spirituals were a form of resistance and remain closely related to African American history at large. Negro spirituals and their social implications were tied, for instance, to the abolition of slavery in 1865 in the US, the Black Renaissance, and the songs of the Black freedom movement of the 1950s and 1960s, now remembered chiefly under the leading figure of Martin Luther King Jr. While slave culture is vastly diverse, there are other important ways in which slaves resisted through the arts and a fierce determination to distinguish themselves. One was through dancing, one of the most upfront examples of resistance, as the master usually explicitly forbid it. The second was clothing, used to create distinctive traits. The slave's ability to change standard, uniform plantation clothing into something more, and refusing to see the clothing they were as making them less human, was a form of resistance. The head wraps, for example, that the women wore, demonstrated the different ways in which each woman could make herself stand out amongst the others with style and color in a system that demanded that everyone be the same and act the same. The head wrap made her different and showed individuality. The same could be said of the elaborate hair braiding techniques that were passed down and remain in use today. So slaves were no masters of their own body during the day. It belonged to the fields and to the master, but dancing changed everything and was also an important component to resisting the condition of slavery. At nights, and most importantly, Saturday night, they sneaked off into the forest to get together and dance, taking back their full body as much as they could. I could go on with more examples, but I have made my point and time has run out. Let's celebrate the role that the arts and culture played and still play in the centuries-long process of emancipation and empowerment of Black, Indigenous, and other marginalized communities. In this, artists and creators such as you, allies in the cause of truth and beauty, play a pivotal role, one that can only grow with the passing of years and the consummate mastery of your craft. I leave you now with this call to action. If you can and have the inclination, please reach out to young people in your community. For example, we know children in most primary schools, teens in high schools are starved for someone like you to come in and share artistic knowledge and skills, inspiration and accomplishments with them. Find a teacher, an educator, offer to come and help. The rewards will be there for all involved. Remember also last year's CSUN keynote by Daniel Levitin? He was clear on one thing. The more conversations you have, the more people you meet, the longer and the more healthy you live. So it's a win-win. To maintain creativity is to share the gift of life, artistic eldership in a rapidly changing world is all about sharing that gift. We must now get to the most important part of our time together, where you get to ask questions and interact or comment. I'm so eager to hear you. Je vous remercie. Miigwech, thank you for being here. Thank you for including me.
Thank you so much, Madame Jean. This has been quite inspiring. I have several takeaways from what you have just talked about. One of the first is the fact that art and resistance tend to go hand in hand and always have and probably always will be, won't they? It just seems unfortunate that art, the best art, seems to always come out of pain and suffering, but it does. And also the fact that you talked about reaching out to younger people. That's something that we've been talking about at CSUN, trying to find a way to facilitate an exchange of ideas from elders to the young. We do that through our mentoring program, but on a larger scale, that would be a wonderful idea. And we're open to any suggestions you may have. I like the idea of reaching out, finding a teacher, finding a class to go into. How would we go about doing that, do you think?
Oh, I think schools would be more than happy to see you coming to them and offering your presence, your contribution. I know that I have this immense, joy and privilege, and every time I pinch myself, as some schools have been made after me, and when I visit these schools in Canada, there are 5 in total in Canada, I see, how much teachers are craving, the children also are craving to see, someone coming and sharing with them creativity and artistic, activities and sharing also stories and memories. And this is the best moment I find, to pass on, the memory, the knowledge, to listen also to these children, and from our own experience to understand what they're saying. And so I think every opportunity has to be seized in engaging in this manner, with young people. And if we remain, and I'm hoping that we will, in contact, of course, I would be more than pleased to pass on information about some of our activities. We have the Power of the Arts for Social Change, a national forum, for example. Would be great to have, some of you coming and sharing your experiences and engaging with us during these amazing gatherings.
That would be very exciting, and we would love to do that. And if we may, we'll take you up on that offer.
I'm hoping you'll do that.
It's interesting that we've been talking about this because there was an article in the Globe and Mail this morning that talked about people at the opposite end of the age spectrum, and that we have a lot in common with young people in that we, aside from our ages, obviously, but many of us in the elder years feel marginalized. Many young people feel marginalized. So we have a lot in common that we have a lot of common ground we can explore. There are a lot of ways that we can talk and work together. It's just finding that connection.
I know that young people often, look at elders as an essential, presence. I know that Indigenous youth say that a lot. They need that connection with the elders. I know that a lot of, Black youth, Black children need that too. They need that connection to the elders. We had just end of July in Halifax, last July, a major National Black Indian Summit. It was very inclusive, but it was like speaking about, the issue of systemic racial discrimination, but from the Black experience, and saying that how much it has to matter to all, and bringing, allies and decision makers from all sectors of society and institutions to the conversation, and letting them understand, the struggle, the pain, the difficulties, the challenges, and at the same time saying it's a shared responsibility. So let's be together on that, for the change that we want to see. And how they spoke about the elders was amazing. They wanted to feel that, there was space with elders, safe spaces where they could speak of their difficulties and get, the sound, experience and words coming from the elders, feeling, making sure that, they could feel that they are not alone. And isn't it something that elders feel too? Elders want to feel that they are not alone. Elders want to feel that we consider experience as part of the solution. Same thing with the youth, they want to be seen as being part of the solution. They want to feel included. So I find that this connection is so essential. It is so essential. It is generous. It is genuine. It is precious.
And as you say, we and I love this, and please correct me if I haven't quoted you correctly, that we are living treasures of memories.
Yes.
That's, I mean, and it would be, as you say, a shame to let those libraries close without being shared.
Yeah.
So we must work on that, and hopefully we can work together. This could be the start of a beautiful friendship, as a famous movie once said.
And you know what? I think in this world of so much uncertainties, of so many uncertainties, we need to come together. Collaboration is key. It's and this is what Breaking Down Solitude is about. Also, my motto. It's about coming together and joining our efforts, our strengths, our experiences, our creativity, because together we are so much stronger. And in this manner, we can actually make sure that, the change that we want to see will happen. So this sense of togetherness, is so powerful. And the arts have this capacity of opening spaces, and facilitate conversation, difficult conversations, to happen. I see young people doing this. Jean-Daniel and I, my husband and I, we were like amazed to see them at work, and so courageously, and to see these new creative practices that they are introducing through the arts. Arts as powerful tools. And we say that as they say it, and they are experts of their experience. Arts can save lives. We see that happening. It's miraculous. It's amazing, because it opens spaces, for us to feel how much we are part of a shared humanity. It's and it's all about having the courage for truth telling, for saying what needs to be said and expressing it in so many beautiful ways. And it's a universal language. It's absolutely wonderful. I used arts also as a tool for diplomacy. I remember, arriving in countries where I didn't know the language, and in African countries, for example, but I could recognize the dance, and I would engage as people would greet me, the women dancing, and I would dance with them. And it created immediately bond. I did that with Roma populations also in Central Europe, engaging with them through dance, joining them. And of course, it was always amazing for them to see, but it was a way of communicating and breaking the ice, and physically being there together, and create like a bridge and a bond. It's magic. And everywhere I went, even in bilateral discussions, bilateral talks, with heads of state and governments, and at one point in the conversation, they would always insist on cultural diplomacy, cultural exchange, the importance of arts and culture to build a relationship. Beautiful, isn't it?
It is indeed. And I think you've just opened up a whole other topic that we could talk for another hour on, but I know you have to go. So I thank you. I thank you so much for spending time with us today. It has been a delight. And as I say, I look forward to continuing this conversation and finding action plans to build on.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you, the artists, provide us and introduce, in our lives. Without you, without creativity, the world would be a gray space. It would be, something without light. With you, it becomes so luminous. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. On behalf of Senator Poulin and everybody at CSUN and everybody here today, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for your thoughts. And as I say, we look forward to talking again. Be well.
Thank you. So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Right Honorable Michaëlle Jean. Thank you very much again for joining us. We're going to take a 10-minute break now, and then we will start our breakout sessions. As I say, it's a chance to meet new artists, or not new artists, but fellow elder artists, but maybe new to your experience, and perhaps renew some acquaintances. So check your email. You will find a link to join the breakout sessions. So you have to get out of this and get into the breakouts. We will post a link on the screen in just a minute or two, which you can type into your browser if for some reason the email has not appeared. Each breakout, as I say, will have a moderator. We'll then regroup in about 40 minutes from now, 50 minutes actually, because we'll take a 10-minute break and then have a 40-minute breakout session. and then we'll summarize our discussion. So between now and then, enjoy your break, enjoy your breakouts. Okay, is everybody back?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for joining the breakouts. I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody had to say. So let's get right to it. We'll go through the breakout moderators and get them to sum up. We'll start with Dan Lyon. Are you there, Dan? If you're there, I need you to unmute.
Unmute. There we go.
There you go.
I did not serve as moderator, so I'm going to give the floor to Nikita Carter.
Well, all right then. Nikita, where are you?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Hello. There we go. Hi. Thanks, Dan. It was kind of a bit of a small group, and so we all just kind of talked and shared. The primary points, Sarah Beth spoke of being touched by the phrase that Madame Jean spoke of, artists being living libraries, and she found that particularly evocative and very touching, and seemed to give her pause for thought in a number of ways. And Heather spoke of the inclusive vision that Madame Jean spoke of, and just the wisdom she brought and the tenderness that she brought. She spoke that. I thought that was a really beautiful word. There was she allowed her caring and her vision of experience through her life to really come through in her observations and her shares about all the different kinds of experiences she had. And I would say that that would be something that all of us there were touched by, the power in the keynote. There was a talk about over time how artistic practice changed. We didn't really get to touch on that many things as we started late and so on. And it was suggested that one of the ways that our practice has changed is that we are more at peace in engaging in the process, not driven in the same kind of a way, but kind of more calm and centered in how we engage in our practice, how we come into our room and what we bring with us. And so I think that that is likely one of the hallmarks of getting older, is that kind of being less fearful, being more centered, and having a broader perspective over time. So those would be some of the things. It was also suggested that time is short, and the importance of being fully engaged is also very important. And so that's there we have a nutshell, unless I've left somebody's point out. I think that I could leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. And don't forget, Nikita will be part of our panel next week during Chapter 2 on the role of the elder artist in a rapidly changing world. The next breakout session, if I have my information correct, was chaired by Philip Silver. Phil, are you there?
I am here. I spent a delightful half hour or so with 7 of my new best friends across the country. Victoria, Algonquin, Lethbridge. It was very nice. One of our participants talked about the Right Honorable Michelle Jean as a beautiful person, and that her presentation was beautiful. And the beauty, we decided, was obviously attractive exterior, but the beauty of her soul and her thoughts for us. And it was all quite inspirational. One of our group had recently been to the Venice Biennale, and commented on how apocalyptic things seem to be in many of the art pieces there. And so there was a short discussion about the world we are living in, a little bit of discussion about, what's the artist's response to that? Do we express that? Or do we perhaps try to counter it through some sense of hope in whatever our form is? No resolution. Each artist will, of course, decide how they want to treat the situation. But there are so many things around us that are could be depressing if we decided to let it go that way, but worthy of expression. Lots of stresses around us. Our question, do we reflect it, or do we interpret it, or do we try to counter it? Everyone felt it was a strong talk from Michaëlle Jean. And as I say, some really interesting chats, and I'm sorry we had to, not that I'm not seeing many faces here that I know and like and want to know more about, but our little group of 7 was quite nice, and I was happy to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip Silver. Bob Underwood, were you a chair?
Jan Miller and I kind of tag teamed this one, Scott.
Okay.
We had 10 very high quality participants, most of whom were visual artists, which I thought was interesting. But we had visual artists, we had screenwriters, we had a comedian, which was refreshing and delightful, and very supportive of CSARN, and wondered how we expand our footprint to a broader community of artists across Canada. So we had some very interesting thoughts and ideas, and Jan is going to corral some of those ideas for us separately outside this conference. But when asked what moments in Michaëlle Jean's keynote address were provocative, that spurred a lot of discussion. It was all very provocative. I mean, that's who she is. That's her DNA. But some of the takeaways from her speech was, art in schools is something that we need to pursue. And some of the participants, particularly the visual artist participants in our group, several had worked in schools on arts projects, which had been extremely successful. Another subject which came up for discussion, and it's a recurring theme, is as artists of all genres become more senior and more elder, it's expected that they perform their art for free and donate their time to whatever particular art form they represent. And it was collectively noted that over the period of the year, the history of CSARN, we had contributed in excess of $300,000 in mentor fees, because it's important that we value artists and recognize their contribution. But schools, recognizing the value of artist contributions, expanding our footprint, those were all well discussed with some great ideas, which Jan and I have made some note on, and we'll bring to the board for further discussion for sure.
Thank you, Bob. That's great. Yes, the art in the school and what Madame Jean spoke about today is something that we are definitely going to pursue. It's something we have talked about at CSARN, not only at the board level, but in the on-salons. And we now appear to have a champion to help us make that happen. So that's very exciting. Millie Ristvat. Millie, you are muted. So just stop that, or start that, as it were.
Okay, I'm here.
Great.
I'm here. Yes, we also talked about programs that exist like Artists in the Schools, and talking about ways in which the artists can get paid for engaging in these is important. Home Share was another program that was brought up, which is an interesting notion. I do know I of at least one person who had a home share student, international student living with her. But the suggestion this the participant made in this discussion was, wouldn't it be lovely if you could match somebody up, a student that's in the same discipline that you are in, so that you could have that kind of relationship. So there's a possibility. And that's a very different way of doing it. And I think I got the feeling, and several of us did, that Michaëlle Jean was offering so many different ways, the importance of understanding, getting a dialogue between younger artists and senior artists. You could have sort of like a ping pong match. Okay, this is my situation. This is my situation. This is where I come from. This is where I come from. This is where I'm at now. This is where I'm at now. You know, something really back and forth like that. Yeah, another one of our participants, Barry, brought up the Writers Union has a funding for programs in the School for Writers. Okay, so there are ways, and CSARN can invent its own. I think the ping pong match is a great one. But the keynote speech really inspired a lot of thought, a lot of energy from everybody. One point that was made was the revolutionary aspect of what she was talking about. And the younger the ones who have the energy to actually engage in revolution, but we have to inspire it, and we have to do it with our truth, with our history. And did ask about the second question: how has the practice changed as you have aged? Well, slow down, but don't beat yourself up about it. Just diversify, find way, and don't stop learning. Just keep on going. Which that was all really great. Number C, do they feel they are doing their best work? The best answer for that was doing the best I can. I loved that. Yeah, and did we get on to, we didn't get past that, but we covered so much. It was such a wonderful group of people from Winnipeg, Vancouver, Toronto, North Bay, all different disciplines, overloaded with writers, but visual artists, actors, you name it. It was great.
All right. Thank you, Millie. Appreciate it. Pauline LaBelle.
Well, that was a fascinating group of people and conversations. So we were kind of all over the place. Lots of people in Toronto, BC, Quebec, Saskatchewan, musicians, writers, storytellers, visual artists. So kind of the whole gamut. And well, we all agreed that she, even though Michaëlle says she's not an artist, that the way she uses language shows she's an artist, very poetic. And some of us love that, living treasures of memory, and others really found that not to their liking, because they said, I'm not a memory, I'm still current. We're still doing this. It's not like what we have is from the past. We are still making new things, right? And so that was very interesting to me. And then this idea of going and volunteering and being in the schools. Now, there are a few of us who have made part of our living by going into the schools and being writer in residence or artist in residence or whatever. And so there's kind of a hesitation to just going off of this as a volunteer. And so what about the idea of approaching Canada Council and to coming up with a new program to bring elder artists into the schools? because I know the Writers Union has but that's only for writers. But it would be really good to have, Canada Council, they got lots of money. So have a program like that where elder artists would be paid to go into the schools. What else did we talk? We never got to the other two questions because we just kept going with this one. So we love the idea of art as resistance. And how do we resist as our art? And so, we talked about Robert Davidson, who this Haida carver, there hadn't been a pole raising in 100 years, and he raised this pole. It's like, we came back to what Michael was talking about, the resistance, and even with the slaves, so the women with their head wraps, and so then we came up with this idea that, well, actually, as elder artists, to avoid invisibility and whatever, so we need some distinctive kind of clothing. And one of the women makes masks, but not everybody's into that, but we need something distinctive. We need to have this movement, and every movement requires a soundtrack. So we need a song, and we have an accordion player who can do the accompaniment, Tina. And so anyway, so we just kind of got really carried away with having this movement of how to use that art as resistance to being invisible, to walking. Several of them talked about walking down the sidewalk and being invisible, and people don't move over. And so this was like, I guess if we had something obvious, I don't know. Anyway, so that was it. It was a great group of people, and we had a lot of fun, I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Excellent. Yeah, we do need a symbol. We'll have to get to work on that. And I guarantee that if we do artists in the schools, we're darn well going to get paid, because art should be rewarded. Art in itself can be a great reward, but you still have to buy groceries. So that will be an important part of any program that CSARN gets involved in. David Ferry, I'm guessing you were next.
Hi, well, thanks everybody and all the moderators for sharing, because it's so reflective of the group that I was with and our discussions. It was an amazing group, about 10 of us, of artists from off the coast of BC through the prairies out here to Toronto. And we didn't have any particular residents in the Eastern Canada in my group, but I'm from Newfoundland originally, so I made up for that. Some really smart things said. You went through Ms. Jean's comments, and particularly struck by the resistance concept, even though one cannot really relate or try and compare oneself to resistance that comes out of slavery. But in my own lifetime, as I mentioned, the idea of in the early 70s, where I was particularly fighting for Canadian cultural issues, of having Canadian voices heard, telling Canadian stories, that's a form of resistance. And some of the most creative times in our lives come out of resistance, which leads to creativity, overcoming oppression, and leads to humanity eventually. I started the conversation really by going to her call to action, which was to get out and to meet young people and to share with young people. And like many of you, my first question was, yeah, and who's going to pay for that? Because we make a living doing what we're doing. And I think it's really important to remember, because there are people out there that believe that artists are grasshoppers that just hop around and share their wealth. But we're not. We're like paying the rent and all of those things, especially as we age, we need to make an income. But I was really excited by the number of people that had positive experiences about working in community centers. As Tabby reminded us, there's a lot of appetite in the community centers for meeting with artists. Libraries are still, even though many of us probably belong to organizations to stop cuts to libraries, librarians are very active in terms of getting artists into libraries. But in the school system too, there was some conversation about it's becoming more restrictive in the school system because they're being very careful about what people can say for political concerns they have. But getting out into those organizations and places to meet with young people. We didn't talk a lot about young artists, Millie, but we did talk about young students and reaching out to them. We also had a conversation about, have you changed as you age as an artist? Are you still creating as actively as you were? Laura mentioned that she doesn't get out that much, especially since COVID. And the more she talked, we were all kind of chuckling, I think, because she said, yeah, and I realized I've still got this tour of my work going through 10 more cities in the United States. And she just has this awesome output of work that's out there. She may be sitting at home, but she was wondering about whether she could actually go down to Texas to see one of her exhibitions down there. And I was blown away by how the various artists in my group were such incredible artists, and their conversation about their work over the years and their experiences going and talking in the school system in particular were very positive ones, and how they got paid. So I thought that was kind of exciting, because I think if we're going to do that, we do need to be recognized for what we do as professional artists. Everybody obviously enjoyed Ms. Jean's comments and what a passionate communicator she is. So that was pretty exciting. I did like the comment, I'm going to paraphrase somebody, is that people without memory are people without a future. And so part of our role as an artist is to create memories, and what we all are storytellers. And as we tell stories, those stories may be extraordinary stories, they may be real, based on real experiences, or something that comes right out of the old noggin. Those stories create a culture, create history, create meaning. And I think that that's the most exciting place for us to be coming from, with all the experience we have in our creative selves, is to keep refining those stories and bringing them out.
Thank you, David. And that gets back to something that I was going to query Pauline about. I think, Pauline, you said that some people in your group didn't like the Living Treasures of Memory reference. I think that's a subject for an on-salon. We can debate that, and we will.
Sounds
Because
good.
can you be one and still be vital, creating and looking at the future? I think you can. Let's talk about that at the next on-salon. And by the way, if you have not participated in one of our online salons, I encourage you to sign up. We've got another one coming up after Maintaining Creativity on November the 15th. So we hope to see you then. Anne Wooten, I think, is the last moderator. Anne?
Sorry, just had to unmute myself. Thank you, Scott. I'll be brief because we're winding up now, but some of our discussion was certainly covered by the other moderators already, but I do have a couple of things to add. We had a group of 4 visual artists and a film director or a film actor, and myself. And we were small but mighty, and from Vancouver, Ottawa, couple from Toronto, and a couple in smaller towns in Alberta and BC. So our group was talking about how we reacted, our takeaways from Madame Jean, and one of them was how moving it was to hear her refer to us as repositories or libraries of memories and experience and creativity. So that was definitely an overreaching theme for all of us. The other one was, if I may refer to you, Vera Frankel, she wanted to ask Madame Jean some questions herself and felt that she didn't have the opportunity. So perhaps later, Scott, you could guide us towards how we might have a conversation with Madame Jean if we had questions specifically for her that only she could answer. And that would be enormously valuable. Some of our artists are involved in environmental issues. Some are also mentoring. Some are finding their way through their present art forms by reaching out to buddy systems. You know, when you've got an audition or you've got a grant application, or finding your people who can help you and you can help them in return. We did talk a little bit about going into schools, but only very briefly. And I think that is just about it from us. And thanks to my little group for being so terrific.
There we go.
I'm
Muted.
trying to, no, there was one important question I had.
Go ahead, Vera.
I was deeply moved by Madame Jean's speech, and I was asking Anne whether there was a way in which we could present it to some of the art and culture politicians in Toronto that badly need to hear it. And Anne said I should ask you.
Very good point. And we will be turning this entire session into a video, including, well, especially Madame Jean's keynote. So that would be one way of doing it, and we'll make sure the word gets out. I think that's a great idea, Vera. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So did I miss anybody? Are there any breakouts that have not been heard from? No, I think we got everybody. So that just about does it for today. I'd like to thank our moderators and thank you all for being part of the breakout sessions today. Hope you can all join us next week for Chapter 2, the role of the elder artist in a rapidly changing world, with Globe and Mail columnist John Ibbitson moderating. And as I mentioned, Nikita Carter, along with Vera Frankel. Both of them will be participating, and Media Maestro Paul Wong will be the third panelist. Thank you so much for being with us here today. To wrap things up, please welcome back the esteemed chair of CSARN's Board of Directors, the Honorable Marie Poulet. I know she's there, but she doesn't appear to be joining us. There she is. There she is.
I just unmuted myself and I started the video. And thank you for everyone, because what's actually extremely rewarding for the small team that has organized this Chapter 1 of Maintaining Creativity. And this team is led by Phil Silver, that you met. And he was helped with Dan Lyon from the CSARN board, Tabby Johnson of the CSARN board, Millie Ristet of the CSARN board, and our esteemed executive director, Scott Walker, and myself. We were appreciative of your reactions to the keynote speaker. So thank you so much. She gave us lots of food for thought. Bon appétit ce soir, I have to admit, with dinner, on thinking about what she told us and what we should be doing. And as Scott said, join us next Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for Chapter 2 of Maintaining Creativity 7. See you then.